My name is Tom Carmichael, and I'd like to tell my story of the years I was at WKY TV, Channel 4 in Oklahoma City. My first encounter with the station was through Monty Mann. He was one of the film projectionists that worked at the station, and he introduced me to Jay Spivey, the stage manager, and I interviewed for a job, and within a day or two I was called and told to report to the station Monday morning, 8:30 in March of 1966. And my time started from that date until September of 1974. The routine, being hired as a cameraman, production man, was to understand how to operate a TK40 camera, which was the first color camera in the television industry, and it was a monster of a camera. And we did live news and weather in the morning, noon, and evening. And I followed the procedures on how that operated. And along with that, at noon we had a program called the Tom Paxton Show in that time period. And it was a 30-minute program, and it was all live. Everything was live. And then after that, we had to get ready for the Foreman Scotty Show in the afternoon. And again, that was a live program with some videotaped Foreman Scotty adventure inserts into the program. And of course, that was a kids program, and we had lots of kids on the show. And Steve Powell was the host of the program. And basically, that was Monday through Friday. That was a typical day in Studio B at WKY TV. Yeah, I'd like to mention Ronnie Kay. I just got back from my basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana in September of 1967. And I started back at work, and my first contact was Jay Spivey, stage manager, and he informed me that I would be a weekend studio supervisor working on the scene with the DJ Ronnie Kay as the host of the program. And my responsibilities were that program and anything that needed to be taped on a weekend. It was a whole new adventure. I knew nothing about lighting, and to be a studio supervisor, you had 2 cameramen, and so there were 3 on the crew. And we had a brand new adventure ahead of us that was the most incredible experience I've ever been through. And I'd like to share some of those moments with Ronnie, and that I met him, and we got to know each other quite well. And he was quite innovative with what he was wanting to accomplish with this dance program. And so we had some preliminary things in place about how he wanted to shoot the program. And of course, the director made those decisions, but there were a lot of things in the studio that were new. And so this was a brand new adventure for everyone. The music, the set design, all the kids that danced on the program, and Deanna, Ronnie's wife, she cultivated all the dancers that or screened the dancers that were on the program, and so there was a lot of dynamics that was created from ground zero, and I was just a complete neophyte at this process. It was a challenge, and we made it into a premier program weekly with innovations. I remember using smoke or fog machines, and we had Bextra posters that we used on the set, and they were all superimposed over the dancers, and the lighting, of course, was very critical. And I worked with the engineers to try to accomplish a studio setting that most any angle that was needed in the studio had proper lighting, and that was an enormous challenge. And so it took a long time to get the details where they were very effective. And so we didn't know. We just knew that we needed proper lighting to have a good image, and we experimented with so many things. And Ronnie had ideas once he saw the show, and Deanna critiqued the show with the dancers, that we put all these ideas together. In the next week's show, we would maybe change or add a dimension that we experimented with. And so it was an ongoing process that lasted for years. We had recording artists that would come in from all over the country, and some I remember that were, I was right there with them, and of course having the responsibility of lighting and somewhat set design under conditions that we only had maybe a short amount of time to videotape recording artists and fit them in. I remember Jerry Lee Lewis came in, and I got to speak to the man and told him, I said, we have a short amount of time to get, we did 2 numbers. One was the Great Balls of Fire, and I don't remember the other cut, but I had to light him so that he looked good. And he, of course, played the piano and used his feet and all this, and he was dynamic. But you know, he was a very big name, and so we were fortunate enough to have him in the studio. We got 2 good cuts from Jerry Lee, and that was it. And they would always ask for a copy so they could use that as a promo for wherever they were going in the country. So we were virtually producing promos for recording artists in our studio, but they were mainly used for inserts within each scene program. And Jerry Lee was a very high profile recording artist, and I remember James Brown came in one time and he had a valet with him, and that valet was primping James Brown every second he was in the studio. And we got one cut from James Brown, and again it was a quick recording, but the main thing, they were very pleased with what they did, and they wanted to leave the station with a copy of that performance. And so apparently they always did, and that was part of the production that we established at the station. Again, those inserts were added in with each weekly program. Another one I remember was Brian Hyland, and he came to the station and did a performance in Oklahoma City, and then he came to the station and we did a recording there, and I ended up driving around the city. he didn't have any transportation. He flew in, and he was just he was on foot, and that was quite a moment to be able to be with someone like that and have a conversation outside of the station. And another, for instance, that I remember when I just got back from the Army, and Ronnie and I were working together on all this. He invited me to go with him to see The Who with Peter Townsend at the Wedgwood Village. And so we went out to the Wedgwood Village, and they were performing. The Who was performing on some kind of a platform. And of course, Peter Townsend took his guitar and smashed it up and played the strings. And they somebody had a birthday in the group, and they had a cake, and they took and threw it all over the audience. And it was just memorable moments like that. And then, of course, the recording of those type of situations, that one was not recorded. That was just, we went out there and they had a performance, and for some reason they couldn't make it to the station. I can't remember the details, but those were big names. And one more that I can recall was Eric Burdon and the Animals. And they came into the city, and Eric Burdon was ill, but he did personally, I believe he was involved with the band on one or two songs, and he was just too ill to go any further. But the Animals played all their recorded music, and it was again a memorable moment, and the list goes on. I just can only remember these particular groups and individuals rather. And they were dynamic. It was just unreal. Well, I'd like to mention the news and weather at WKY TV. Ernie Schultz was the news director, and I quite vividly remember Jack Ogle and Bob Berry because of OU football, to include Daryl Barton, who at that time, he had a film camera, 16 millimeter, that shot his own version of the game. Boy, one thing I'd like to mention about this OU and Nebraska game, and that we flew first class with the cheerleaders to Nebraska, and at the game, Jack Ogle, he was the commentary to the game, and then of course Bob Berry was play-by-play commentary with the game, and it was just an incredible opportunity. I ended up being on the isolated camera, and it fed a Ampex, what they call the slow-mo. One thing I'd like to really mention is the engineering department. E.K. Gaylord was very much aware of key individuals that could make all this work. And two key individuals that I truly remember, and I'm sure I'm leaving someone out, but the two that I worked with was one, Aaron Britton, and he was involved in the development of radar in World War II. And from that development, he transitioned into the beginning of television, commercial television, which started in 1949 in Oklahoma City, along with Willard Hines. And Willard Hines was an engineer. He built that station with creative things beyond a person's imagination. And so I came in the 1960s when these people had already established all these things, and it was just absolutely a unbelievable experience to be around them and to work with them, But I ended up working with Aaron Britton because of my connection with being involved with lighting and being studio supervisor on weekends. And so Aaron Britton, basically he was my mentor, and I wanted to understand the dynamics of studio lighting. And this man, he was an innovator, and I respected every moment being around Aaron and many others. Willard Hines was a phenomenal engineer. Lester Tucker, Jack Lovell. It's just names that are it's just endless. The most prestigious event that I had at the station was when Jay Spivey, the stage manager at that time, was confined to a wheelchair, and he was his main forte was lighting, studio lighting, and he was not able to do what he normally had done in the past. So what had transpired is that the Secret Service had contacted Jay, and they needed the President of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon, to be properly lit, which was outdoors, on a platform, and it would be in the afternoon with the sun set, and it was a very complicated situation, and that he gave me that assignment, and it was definitely the premier event of the years that I worked at WKY TV. And I did work with the Secret Service. That event went off flawless. And throughout the week that it took to properly light the stage that the President actually gave this address on, it was just absolutely phenomenal to witness the President, and I was standing maybe 50 feet in front of him, and we had, of course, the camera crew, and it was a national feed. We fed it to all 3 networks at the same time, and of course it was videotaped, and it was just a monumental event. Another monumental event was when I started working for the Buck Owens Country and Western show, and I had never experienced such an experience of working with such a professional in the music industry. And Buck Owens was like a John Wayne, and he would walk in the studio, and he had a cadre of people that would follow him around. And it was his personal staff, and of course he had 2 or 3 sons that were involved in the production, and of course one in the band, and that was Buddy Owens. And it was just he was like Buck Owens was an incredible businessman. He was like a Donald Trump, and along with the John Wayne image that the public really never saw this type of Buck Owens. He was so professional that he presented himself in front of the camera on the set. That was a real challenge for me, because I took over as lighting and studio supervisor after Jon Spence had resigned from the program, and I was definitely prepared for stepping into that position. The studio set of the Buck Owens Ranch was conceived by Doyle Glazier. He was the art director at WKY TV, and this man was phenomenal in coming up with this concept, because it was like a country California ranch style that he conceived, and it was created and of course built by Jack Wilkerson at the station, and it was made like a jigsaw puzzle, and it took a complete day to set this setup, and it was the main set. And the hours it would take, it was at least 8 to 10 hours, and of course there were vignette areas in the studio as well, and it was just like being in California. The lighting of this particular show, the Buck Owens show, it took a complete day just to set the preliminary lighting, and it would take throughout each day of filming, I would spend hours and hours just in tweaking lighting so that we could get the finest details for each segment that we videotaped. And that I reached one point at one time with a show, and of course Buck Owens, he allowed me latitude, and that if I ever saw anything that would be distractive to the taping, that I could actually stop the production and make the adjustment, and we could go on. And one time a light drifted, and that was those things could happen. And a light did drift one time, and I felt like it was a necessity to make an adjustment, and I had got on the catwalk and got on the grid with all the lighting, and I finally had to mention to Buck Owens that in the middle of his production that we need to make an adjustment, and it was a necessary adjustment because he wanted detail at the optimum on each performance, and he had no problem with that. He allowed me that much latitude in my work. I'd like to mention the Buck Owens band. Buck Owens, he played guitar and was vocal. Buddy Owens, his son, was guitar and vocal. Charley Rich was guitar and vocal. They also had special performers on each segment, and the ones I really remember was Suzane Ray. She was on every show. The Hagar Brothers, Roy Clark, Charley Pride, and Nath Nutter. These are a few names I would like to mention. Joe Jerkens, Program Director. Bill Thrash, Assistant Program Director. Gene Schaus, Videotape. Jerry Rogers, Director. John Weil Munster, Audio, Video Control Room. Ken Copeland, Audio. Jim Weimer, Cameraman. And Sally Boatwright, Evening Receptionist. The most special person I'd like to reflect on is Aaron Britton. He was very special to me in all the years that we worked together, and I'm just grateful for everything I experienced working with this man that's affected me my entire life.